I'm Angela Reed. I'm 32 now, and for as long as I can remember, my birthday has come and gone without so much as a candle, while my sisters were marked by flower walls, photo booths, and catered desserts. Last year, I told myself I wouldn't say a word. I'd let the silence speak for itself and see if anyone remembered. They didn't. Not a call, not a card, just another celebration for Courtney, while mine faded like it always did. Only this time, I had something they didn't know about, $8 million in a plan before we go any further. I want to know what time you're listening and where you're tuning in from, and if you've ever had to remind someone that you mattered, hit that like button and tell me your city in the comments. I was raised in a quiet suburb just outside Denver, the kind of place where every lawn is trimmed to perfection, and folks wave from the driveway while warming up the grill. For the 4th of July, our house was one of the biggest on the block, 5 bedrooms and a pool, and that barely got used but was great for holiday photos. My dad built a name flipping high-end properties, and my mom left her event planning job to focus on charity work and social clubs. By the time I was 10, our lives looked polished from the outside, but inside our family ran on one unspoken truth. Courtney came first. My sister was 2 years younger, and from the start, she sparkled in a way people didn't seem to expect from me. She was loud, charming, and artistic, where I was quiet, thoughtful, and steady. If she won a school contest, Dad called the local paper. If I won one, it meant dinner was on time. That night, I remember once bringing home a medal from a science fair, excited and proud. I'd spent weeks on that solar model, only to have Dad pat me on the head, say, "Good work, kid," and then return to a conversation about Courtney's spelling bee ribbon, which Mom had already ordered a custom cake for, shaped like a dictionary. Our living room became a sort of trophy case for her. There were photos, from dance recitals, ribbons from art shows, even a laminated flyer from a youth gallery. My achievements, if they made it into the house at all, usually ended up in a drawer in the kitchen next to spare batteries and coupon books. The older I got, the clearer the divide became. When I turned 11, I remember waking up early expecting pancakes or maybe just a birthday card. Instead, I found my parents running around with garment bags and makeup kits. Courtney had a regional dance competition that day. They forgot completely. Mom gasped at the calendar that evening and said, "Oh, honey, your birthday slipped our minds. Dad promised to make it up to me, but the weekend came and went, and all I saw were posts about Courtney's medal." That wasn't a one-time mistake. My 15th birthday landed on the same weekend as a tour of a private art school for her mom. Said it would be best if I stayed with Grandma because Courtney needed focus. I spent that day on Grandma's couch eating oatmeal cookies and watching reruns, while my feed filled with pictures of Courtney posing in front of ivy-covered buildings. When I turned 18, she gave a valedictorian speech and they threw a backyard party with a string quartet, while I got a text from Mom the next day that just said, "Sorry, sweetie." Yesterday was a blur. My best friend Patricia saw it before I did. She'd been coming to our house since we were kids, and she started whispering things like, "They don't treat you the same during sleepovers." It helped to hear that, but it didn't change how birthdays came and went, like passing dates on a calendar. Courtney's life was a canvas, and mine was an afterthought. Family gatherings were the worst holidays. Especially aunts and uncles swarmed Courtney asking about her latest art shows or college prospects. I'd sit on the edge of the room politely smiling. Sometimes someone would ask about my robotics club, but before I could answer, the conversation would drift back to Courtney's portfolio and whether she'd thought about applying to schools in New York. I got good at folding my hurt into small nods and quiet bites of food. By the time I was 16, I started writing things down. Each forgotten celebration, every unacknowledged award, every time Mom changed the subject. When I spoke, my notebook wasn't a diary. It was evidence, quiet proof that what I felt was real, that I wasn't making it up or being too sensitive. It became a habit. After every overlooked moment, I'd sit down and record it in ink. Not because I wanted pity, but because someday I knew I'd need to remember how often they forgot, and the first time I tried to tell them how I felt. Well, that's where this story really begins. The summer I turned 11, I woke up expecting the usual something small, maybe a card or pancakes with extra syrup. Instead, I found my parents bustling around the house, loading bags into the trunk and checking off a list pinned to the fridge. My sister Courtney had a regional dance competition that weekend, and every bit of energy in the house was focused on her hair gel and sequined leotard. I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, waiting to be noticed. When Mom finally glanced at the calendar, she gasped, "Oh no, Angela, your birthday!" She said, her voice tight with guilt, but her eyes already drifting back to the garment bag in her hand. Dad promised we'd celebrate next week, but that next week never came. By the time I was 15, I knew better than to expect anything. That year, Courtney had a campus tour at an exclusive art academy out of state, and my parents decided I'd stay with Grandma Ruth for the weekend. "It's an important opportunity for your sister," Mom said, while packing Courtney's bags in the living room. "We'll do something special another time." I spent that birthday on my grandmother's floral couch eating oatmeal cookies and flipping through reruns on her old TV set. No calls, no cards. On social media, I watched the posts roll in Courtney, posing on manicured lawns beside faculty, Mom gushing about new doors opening. My name didn't come up once. When I turned 18, Courtney was the valedictorian. She gave a speech in a white dress on a rented stage in our backyard, while a live quartet played soft jazz under twinkling lights. I watched from the porch, a week away from leaving for college, clutching a gift I'd bought for myself with babysitting money. The next day, Mom sent me a short text. "So sorry, sweetie, yesterday was just so busy." That was it. There were moments that year when it all caught up to me. At Thanksgiving dinner, an uncle tried to ask about my robotics team win, but before I could answer, Mom steered the conversation back to Courtney's gallery submission. Everyone clapped when she mentioned the art critics' feedback. No one looked my way. I'd sit through these gatherings, picking at my food, counting how many questions I'd be asked compared to Courtney. Most years the number was 0. I didn't talk about it much. When I did, people told me not to take it personally, that parents get busy, that some kids are just more outgoing. But Patricia saw it. She'd been there through it all, birthday parties that never happened, school award nights where no one showed up for me. She started to write little notes and tuck them into my locker. "I see you," or "You did amazing last night." I saved every one of them. By 16, I'd filled almost half of the notebook I kept hidden under my bed. I'd log each date, each forgotten milestone, and what Courtney was doing that took priority instead. I didn't write it out of anger. I needed something solid, something to hold on to on the days I started questioning if it was really as bad as it felt. That winter, I decided to try one last time. I waited until Courtney was out of the house and found my parents in the living room, Dad with a magazine in hand, Mom scrolling on her phone. "Can we talk?" I asked. Mom nodded without looking up. I told them everything, how it felt to be left behind, how my birthdays always took second place to whatever Courtney was doing. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled in my lap. Dad lowered his magazine, gave a sigh, and said, "You're too sensitive, Angela. She's just more outgoing. You don't share much, so it's harder to celebrate what we don't see." Mom added that Courtney's at a critical stage and they're doing everything they can to support her future. "Your time will come," she said with a smile that felt more like a dismissal than reassurance. Then Dad opened his magazine again, and the moment passed. Nothing changed after that conversation. If anything, it got worse. I wrote longer entries in the notebook paragraphs, now not just bullet points. My handwriting grew sharper, more careful. I started ending each entry with the same phrase, "They didn't see me." College was my escape plan. I applied to the University of Colorado in Boulder. The engineering program had a great reputation, and it was just far enough from home that I wouldn't have to come back every weekend. When my acceptance letter came, I told my parents over dinner. Mom smiled and said, "That's nice." Angela then turned to ask Courtney about her upcoming art showcase. Dad didn't look up at all. That night, I added a new entry to my notebook, accepted to Boulder. No reaction. When I moved into my dorm at 18, I felt like I could finally breathe. I unpacked my boxes, set up my desk, and left the notebook on my nightstand. I didn't expect things to be easy, but I thought maybe they'd feel different. That first year, I threw myself into classes, stayed up late working on coding projects, and found a rhythm that was mine. But when my birthday rolled around, I checked my phone all day. No messages. 2 days later, I got a text from Mom. "Sorry, honey, meant to call for your birthday. Busy week. Hope it was good." The next year, it was the same. Courtney had a solo exhibit in New York, and my parents flew out to support her. I bought myself a cupcake from the campus cafe and lit a single candle. That night, Patricia called and sang happy birthday off-key over the phone. I laughed even as I felt something crack deep inside. Not from sadness, but from how predictable it had become. I never stopped writing in the notebook. It was the only place where I didn't have to explain myself or justify how things felt. The entries stacked up birthday after birthday, each one a footnote in someone else's success. I didn't know what I was building yet, only that I was collecting something that mattered. By the time junior year came around, I had stopped reaching out. The calls home grew shorter. My voice would trail off when I mentioned a scholarship or a hackathon win, only to be met with a distracted, "That's great," before the conversation shifted back to Courtney's gallery contacts or her latest commission. One day, Dad even said tech's a stable field, but it's not exactly legacy building. Art leaves a mark. I didn't reply. Tiffany, a data science major I met during a project, noticed how I flinched when those calls came in. She didn't push, but she listened. And when I shared a few details one night over coffee, she said, "You don't need their spotlight, Angela. You're already lighting your own path." I wrote that one down too, not in the notebook, but in a separate place. A place where for the first time I started writing down the things that made me feel strong. I didn't invite anyone to my college graduation. I knew where they'd be. Courtney had another exhibit opening that weekend. Instead, I packed up my apartment, donated my cap and gown, and drove straight to Salt Lake City for my first full-time job. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like most of the things in my life. But that's where everything really started to shift. Starting my new job in Salt Lake City felt like turning a page, though I didn't say that out loud. I was 22 in a new apartment with mismatched furniture and a view of the Wasatch Mountains. I worked for a mid-sized tech company that specialized in healthcare analytics. It wasn't flashy, but it was fast-paced, and they treated me like I had something to offer. My team lead introduced me during a Monday stand-up with a quick "Angela, here's joining us full-time," and within a few weeks I was writing code for tools used in real hospitals. I kept my head down and focused. I stayed late, learned quietly, and watched how people explained problems they didn't have answers for. It felt good to be useful to fix things no one else could. My desk was near the window, and when the sun hit around 4 o'clock, it would light up my notebook, the same one I'd carried since high school. I kept it in the top drawer of my desk, under a folder of old passwords. I didn't open it every day, but when I did, it grounded me. That first year, I logged birthdays as usual. My 23rd came and went without a call. Mom sent a group text 2 days later that read, "Happy belated sweetie, we were at Courtney's gallery opening. Hope it was a great day." I added the entry like I always did, careful with the date and time. I didn't cry or dwell on it, I just wrote it down. By the time I was 24, I had stopped updating them on work. There was no point. The last time I tried, I'd just wrapped a tricky analytics project that helped streamline ER wait times. I called home hoping for maybe a minute of interest. Dad answered, asked how I was, and then said, "You'll never guess Courtney got invited to exhibit in Chicago. That's huge for her." I said, "That's great," and hung up soon after. My friendships filled in where family didn't. Patricia and I talked almost daily, usually late at night, when she finished her shifts at the bank. She listened always, never rushed me. Sometimes she'd ask for details about my projects, even when she didn't understand the tech. It felt like being seen. And Tiffany, the data scientist on my team, became someone I could lean on during lunch breaks or walks around the building. She was sharp, funny, and didn't miss much. One afternoon, Tiffany caught me sitting on the office balcony with my notebook in my lap. I'd just finished writing an entry after Mom forgot my birthday for the third year in a row. I closed the book as she approached, but she didn't ask questions. She just sat down and said, "Want to grab tacos tonight?" That was her way. She didn't push, but she made space. I got promoted at 25. It wasn't dramatic, just a new title and a spot at the project meetings I used to take notes for. I told Patricia that night, and we toasted with takeout and canned wine. I didn't tell my parents. That same week, Courtney announced a residency in New York, and the family group chat lit up with messages and plans for a send-off party. The hurt wasn't sharp anymore. It was quiet. I'd scroll past the photos of catered dinners and floral centerpieces and feel a strange mix of distance and clarity. I started writing longer entries in the notebook, not just events, but the way they made me feel. I tracked patterns, how often my accomplishments were acknowledged versus how often Courtney's were celebrated. The numbers weren't close. Tiffany noticed I stopped joining the group for Friday lunches. One day, she sat down next to me in the break room and slid a coffee my way. "You disappear when something good happens," she said without looking at me. I didn't deny it. I just nodded. "That's when I feel it the most," I said. She understood. At 26, I led my first small team. We were building a predictive tool for hospital diagnostics, and the deadlines were tight. I stayed at the office most nights until 9 running tests refining models. My mentor, Andrew Hayes, called me into his office one Thursday. His walls were covered in framed patents and worn-out whiteboards. He smiled and said, "You're the one they call when nothing else works. That's not a bad reputation to have." I thanked him, left the room, and wrote it down in the back of the notebook. Not under family, but under proof. By then, I had stopped trying to earn a place at my family's table. I turned down invitations, skipped holidays, and spent Thanksgiving that year with Patricia's parents in Phoenix. Her mom made sweet potato casserole and insisted I take the last piece home. Her dad asked about my work like it mattered. I slept better in their guest room than I had in years. Work became more than a job. It became the place I measured my value. The new diagnostics tool launched to great results, and suddenly people outside my department started remembering my name. Tiffany walked by my desk one morning and whispered, "You know you're killing it, right?" I smiled, but I didn't say much. I just went home that night and wrote in the notebook again. It was around then that the idea began to take shape. Not revenge, not even payback. Just something firm and real that would show them what they missed. I didn't know how or when, but I knew I wasn't going to explain myself again. If they couldn't see it, after all this, they weren't going to. And I wasn't going to wait for another birthday to prove my place. That was the year I started saving carefully, deliberately, and let the silence stretch a little longer. By the time I started my freshman year at the University of Colorado, I had stopped waiting for things to feel fair. Boulder was just far enough from Denver to give me space and just close enough that I didn't feel like I'd disappeared. I moved into a small dorm room on the east side of campus, shared with a pre-med student who played the violin and kept a whiteboard calendar of her test dates. We got along fine, but I kept mostly to myself those first few months, showing up early to class, working through lunch, and spending nights in the campus computer lab. My birthday came in the spring during midterms. I remember walking to the library that morning with frost still on the grass, checking my phone before class. Nothing. I waited until noon. Still nothing. That evening, I got a short message from Mom. Meant to call, things have been crazy helping Courtney move into her new place. Hope your birthday was a good one. I didn't write back. I just added it to the notebook, careful to log the time. Courtney had started an art residency in Manhattan that year, and the whole family was involved in helping her set up. Dad booked the movers. Mom flew out to help her paint. The group chat filled with pictures of her new apartment and a corner studio she'd converted from the dining area. My name didn't come up. No one asked what I was working on, or if I'd made new friends, or how classes were going. So I stopped updating them. I stopped calling unless something required it. When they reached out, it was always about Courtney, where she was showing next, who was buying her work, which gallery was considering a feature. By sophomore year, I'd picked up a part-time job at a small Boulder startup. They were building an app for machine learning and healthcare logistics, and they needed someone who could clean up their back-end systems and organize their code. I worked evenings and weekends while balancing class projects, and it quickly became more than just a job. I started to feel like I was contributing to something real, something that might actually change things for people. That winter, we had a hackathon across several departments, and I led a team that built a working prototype of a scheduling tool that adapted to ER surges in real time. We came in second place, but one of the judges, a visiting engineer from Seattle, pulled me aside and said, "You've got something here. Don't stop building." I remember writing that down, not just the words, but the way he said them. No hesitation, just certainty. I shared the news with Patricia that night over video chat. She was back home in Denver, still working at the bank and taking care of her younger brother. But she never missed a call. She grinned when I told her. "They should have had a banner waiting for you at home," she said. I laughed. Then I told her they didn't even text. When I mentioned the project to my parents later that week, Dad answered the phone, distracted. "That's great, kid," he said. "By the way, did you see that write-up on Courtney's gallery in the Arts magazine? That's a big deal." I nodded silently into the phone, then said I had to get back to class. The conversation lasted 4 minutes. My junior year came with a shift in pace. I was asked to stay on at the startup as a lead intern and given more responsibility. I had access to internal planning meetings, started reviewing other developers' code, and met weekly with the founding team. At the same time, I kept up my classes, kept pushing forward, and kept quiet at home. It wasn't bitterness, it was habit. I had learned how to take up space in the places that made room for me and shrink in the ones that didn't. That spring, I won a scholarship for underrepresented students in tech. It covered tuition and included a mentorship program with engineers across the state. I didn't tell my family. I told Tiffany, who had just joined the startup full-time, and started mentoring the interns. We grabbed coffee and sat on the back patio of the office, the wind coming off the mountains sharp against our faces. She asked why I looked uneasy, and I told her I wasn't used to celebrating wins. She looked at me for a long time before saying, "You need to stop shrinking around people who didn't help build you." I didn't forget that. My 21st birthday came while finals were going on. Patricia mailed me a box of little things, a candle, some cookies from our favorite bakery back home, and a mug that said, "Build quietly, succeed loudly." She'd written, "Happy birthday, CEO in training" on the card in blue ink. That night, I sat in my dorm with my laptop open, a cupcake on the desk, and her card taped to the wall above my monitor. I didn't hear from my parents. Senior year passed quickly. I kept my head down, kept building, and accepted a full-time offer from the startup in Salt Lake City 3 weeks before graduation. I didn't tell anyone at home until the week I moved. I didn't expect much, and I wasn't disappointed. Courtney had just booked a month-long installation in Los Angeles, and all eyes were on that. I didn't invite anyone to commencement. I didn't post photos or mark the moment publicly. I walked across the stage with my hands steady and my eyes forward, took the diploma, and drove home in a borrowed car with everything I owned in the back seat. I returned my cap and gown to the bookstore the next morning and left town without looking back. Salt Lake City was quiet, the kind of quiet that made room for ideas. I moved into a studio apartment near the foothills, started work that Monday, and found myself in a team that valued contribution over noise. I wasn't the loudest, but I got noticed. I stayed late, offered help, and kept my code clean. Within 3 months, my team lead asked me to take over a segment of the diagnostics tool. I didn't tell my parents. I kept working, kept saving, and kept writing. Not every day, but when something hurt or something felt like proof. The notebook came with me to Utah, tucked in a drawer beside spare keys and tax forms. It was thicker now, held together with tape and folded corners. Some pages were dog-eared. Others had dates I barely remembered writing. But the pattern was there always: a stretch of silence, a win, another overlooked birthday. And somewhere in that silence, a shift began. I turned 27 in the middle of a work sprint. We were deep into building a predictive platform for hospital triage, and my team was stretched thin. I managed scheduling quality checks and rewrites, usually long after the office lights dimmed. Most nights it was just me and a few others, hunched over glowing monitors, fueled by stale coffee and takeout noodles. I didn't mind. When I looked at what we were building, something that could ease pressure on real nurses in real ERs, it felt like time well spent. That spring, our internal demo showed the platform could reduce intake bottlenecks by 20%. Clients were cautiously optimistic. My lead sent the results to the executive team with my name attached. It didn't make headlines, but word spread quietly. One afternoon, I was called into a conference room where Andrew Hayes, our CTO, waited. I'd only seen him in hallway glimpses, gray jacket, steady voice, patent plaques on the walls behind him. He waved me in, closed the door, and gestured to the chair across from him. He didn't offer praise right away. He asked about the code, the logic behind my model, why I chose a particular decision tree method over another. I answered as clearly as I could, trying not to over-explain. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You catch what other people miss. That's rare. Don't wait for permission to lead." I nodded, unsure of what to say. He handed me a Post-it note with a list of departments and told me to call him if I wanted to do more. After that, things shifted. I didn't just follow instructions, I shaped them. I worked with designers, met directly with data vendors, and helped craft language for our product demos. Tiffany and I were paired more often now. She had a sharp mind and no patience for inefficiency. We balanced each other well. She once told me over lunch, "You're building an empire and don't even realize it." I laughed, but she wasn't joking. When we pitched the platform to a national healthcare group the following year, Andrew asked me to lead the presentation. I stood in front of 15 board members, walking through projections, real-time output, and a case study from a Denver trauma unit. I wore a simple navy blazer, my hair tied back. When it was over, there was silence, then a round of questions that I handled one by one. We got the deal. That quarter, everything accelerated. Our division spun off into a subsidiary startup under the company's umbrella, and I was asked to lead the product team. I worked weekends. I skipped vacations. I rewrote code until it passed every scenario test. There was pride, but also pressure. I felt it in my chest sometimes when I woke up, a dull thrum that faded once I got to my desk. Still, I never shared these milestones with my parents. When Courtney held her third gallery opening in Los Angeles that summer, Mom sent a link to the press release in the family group chat. I clicked it once, then muted the thread. I didn't check back. Instead, I started looking at real estate. It wasn't impulsive. I had been saving for years, quietly funneling bonuses and performance awards into a separate account. I wanted something mine somewhere quiet, a place I could step into and say, "This is what I built." Tiffany and I joked about mountain houses once sitting on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by takeout containers. She pulled up listings in Aspen's sleek homes with glass walls and winding private drives. I bookmarked one and never unbookmarked it. Then in 2023, everything changed. A multinational healthcare group approached our startup with an offer to acquire the platform. Andrew brought me into the negotiation room early. I helped prepare materials, built out live demos, and sat through every review round. The final number landed just shy of $100 million. My share after taxes and internal splits was $8 million. The moment the wire came through, I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't even consider it. I texted Tiffany instead. She met me at a bar near the office, slid into the booth with wide eyes and said, "What?" Now I told her I didn't know, not yet. But something was starting to take shape. The next day, I went back to that bookmarked house. 6 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, a private trail leading up into the trees, listed at 7.5. I called the agent. Tiffany came with me to the first showing. We drove through narrow turns past iron gates and stretches of snow-dusted pines. When the house came into view, she whispered, "This feels like a movie." I stood in the middle of the empty living room with my palms open. Light poured in from the ridge. The air smelled like cedar and cold stone. I didn't need to think twice. We signed papers in February. I didn't tell anyone, not Patricia, not even Andrew. I wanted to wait. My birthday was coming up in May. I knew without question it would be forgotten again. And this time, I was ready. The plan wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about attention. I just wanted the truth to be visible for once, to be undeniable. Tiffany helped me draft a post. 1 photo, 1 line of text. I saved it to my phone and waited. The closer my birthday got, the more I could feel something steady building. Not nerves, just certainty. My 32nd birthday landed on a Thursday. I didn't mark the calendar. I didn't drop hints in the family group chat, which had gone quiet, except for Courtney's gallery news and Mom's forwarded articles. They'd forgotten before. I expected them to forget again. The day started early. I drove up to Aspen with a key in my pocket and a travel mug of coffee resting in the console. The sky was clear, the kind of spring blue that still carried a chill. When I pulled up the winding drive and parked in front of the house, I sat for a moment before getting out. The air smelled like pine and melting snow. Inside the house was still mostly empty. Just a few pieces of furniture delivered the week before, and a set of mugs Tiffany had sent as a joke, each one with the word CEO printed in a different font. I stood by the windows looking out toward the ridge and listened to the quiet. No buzzing phones, no missed calls, just stillness. Around noon, I drove back to Salt Lake City and opened my laptop. I had the post ready, 1 photo taken that morning on the deck mountains in the background, me in a simple coat holding the key. The caption was short. Special child celebrates alone again. I hovered over the button for a moment, then clicked post. The notifications started within minutes. Friends reacted first. Comments poured in congratulations. Heart emojis, stunned messages asking, "Is this yours?" A few texted privately wanting to know the story. I let them wonder. Then the comments from my family began. Courtney was first. "Whose house is this? Stop showing off." Then Mom. "Angela, where are you? Call me. Now." And Dad. "This is irresponsible. Where did the money come from?" Their panic came through loud and fast, like they couldn't believe I'd done something this big without them knowing. I didn't answer. Patricia had been waiting. She'd seen the photo already and sent me a message earlier that morning. I hope they see what they missed, but even if they don't, I do. She liked the post publicly and added a comment that read, "Looks like someone's thriving." Happy birthday, Queen. More friends followed. Birthday wishes, inside jokes, even a few co-workers chiming in. The comments started to drown out my family's messages, which only made them more desperate. Courtney posted again, "You're making a scene. This isn't about your birthday. Grow up." I didn't respond. I didn't delete anything either. I just let it sit. By evening, my phone was lit up with missed calls. 3 from Mom, 2 from Dad, 1 from Courtney. I put it on silent and left it face down on the kitchen counter. That night, Mom sent a final message. "Angela, we need to talk. Dinner tomorrow at our place. 7 sharp. No excuses." I stared at the message for a while. It didn't feel like an invitation. It felt like a summons. I closed the phone without replying. The next morning, I met Tiffany at a coffee shop near the office. She scrolled through the post on her phone, sipping her drink and grinning. "They're scrambling," she said. "You shook the ground under them." I nodded. They expected me to stay quiet. Like always, "What are you going to say at dinner?" "I don't know," I said, "but I'm bringing the notebook." We sat in silence for a minute. Then she raised her cup in a mock toast. to the loudest quiet move anyone's ever made. That afternoon, I opened the notebook at home. I hadn't touched it in weeks, but I knew exactly where I left off. I flipped back through the pages, birthdays, awards, project launches, each one marked and dated. There were years of details, all written in the same careful hand. I wasn't angry as I read them, just clear. This wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't about revenge. It was time. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't rehearse. But I packed the notebook in my bag, zipped it shut, and left it by the door. Tomorrow at dinner, I would bring it with me, and for the first time, I wouldn't let them talk over what I had lived. I pulled into my parents' driveway just before 7. Their house looked exactly as I remembered stone planters by the front door porch lights on blinds drawn tight. Courtney's convertible was already parked out front. I sat in the car for a moment, hand resting on the zipper of my bag, the notebook tucked neatly inside. I didn't use my key. I rang the doorbell. Mom answered with a smile too wide to be real. "Angela, come in." The dining room was set like a holiday table, polished silverware cloth napkins, Dad's favorite red wine already breathing beside the roast chicken. Courtney sat at the far end, tapping her phone with one hand, not looking up. Dad was by the bar, cart glass in hand, his jaw tense. We sat. No one spoke at first. Plates were passed, food served, and then Dad set down his glass. "So, Angela," he said, not bothering with a lead-in, "are you going to explain that Instagram post? Whose house is that? And where did the money come from?" I reached down, unzipped my bag, and placed the notebook on the table. "It's mine," I said. "I bought it. With my own money." Courtney blinked. "That house? You're kidding." $7.5 million. Paid in full, with the bonus I earned after we sold the platform I built. Mom's fork paused midair. "That's a huge decision, Angela. Why wouldn't you tell us?" I opened the notebook and flipped to the first marked page. "Because you've never asked. And when I tried, you didn't listen." I began to read. May 2010. "You left for Courtney's dance competition on the morning of my 11th birthday. I ate cereal alone. You remembered 2 days later. May 2014. I stayed with Grandma while you toured an art school. I turned 15 on her couch. May 2017. My 18th. You texted me the day after Courtney's valedictorian party." Mom opened her mouth, but I kept going. My voice didn't shake. Each entry landed like a stone on the table. June 2019. Robotics competition, win. I called to tell you. You said, "That's great, but Courtney just sold another piece in Chicago." July 2021. Promotion at work. No response. Courtney had a feature in a design magazine that week. Dad frowned, his tone hardening. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We've always supported both of you." "No," I said. "You supported her. I built everything I have while you looked the other way." Mom set her napkin down slowly. "Courtney's career needed us. The arts are competitive. She needed help getting noticed." I nodded once, and I was already invisible. Courtney finally looked at me. I didn't know it was this bad. "But posting that house like a billboard? You wanted to humiliate us." I turned a page. May 2022, my 29th. You were in LA for her gallery opening. I got a group text 2 days later. Dad leaned forward. "Angela, this isn't the way to handle things. We love you. But buying a mansion behind our backs, that's reckless." I looked at him calmly. "I didn't need your approval. I needed space. And now I have it." Mom's voice softened. "We didn't mean to make you feel less important. You've always been strong. We thought you didn't need as much." "I stopped needing you," I said, "when it became clear you'd already picked your favorite." Courtney stood. "I said I was sorry." I nodded. "And I heard you. But it's too late to rewrite what happened." I closed the notebook, placed it back in my bag, and stood. "You don't get to claim my success now that it's public. You didn't see it being built and you didn't want to. Dad stood too. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being done." I walked toward the door. Mom followed her voice, catching. "Angela, please, we can do better." I paused at the threshold. "You had 32 years. I'm not giving you a 33rd. Then I left. The night air felt cool against my skin. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. At home, I blocked their numbers. That weekend, I opened the windows of the Aspen house and let the mountain air fill the rooms. Patricia arrived with wine and a housewarming gift, 3 candles and a card that read, "Welcome home." Tiffany came up the next day, brought her laptop, and we worked from the deck for hours. I didn't explain the dinner. I didn't need to. The morning after the dinner, I woke early without an alarm. The sky outside my window was pale blue, and the stillness inside the Aspen house felt different, not just quiet, but clean. I stood barefoot on the deck with a cup of coffee, watching the trees sway, just enough to remind me the world was still moving even without them. Patricia arrived that afternoon with a small grocery bag, 2 bottles of wine, and a candle shaped like a pine cone. We cooked pasta in the new kitchen and talked about everything but the past. She didn't ask how dinner went. She didn't need to. Later, we sat on the floor with plates in our laps, and she lit the candle. The next weekend, Tiffany drove up in her old SUV laptop in the back, and sleeves rolled to her elbows. She brought a folding table, a cooler of snacks, and a card that read, "Keep building. You're not done yet." We worked from the sunroom for hours, taking breaks to walk the trail behind the house. At one point, she paused under a tall cedar and said, "You really made something here." I just nodded. The calls and messages from my parents stopped after that. I didn't reopen the group chat. I didn't send updates. My sister emailed once a short note asking if we could talk sometime. I read it, closed it, and let it sit. At work, things kept moving. I stepped into a larger role on our next initiative, mentoring newer engineers and shaping the framework for a new tool. It wasn't about being impressive. It was about building something that lasted and knowing that the people who mattered would see it without needing to be told. I hosted friends at the house that summer, small groups, simple meals, people who made space without making noise. The living room filled with soft music, quiet laughter, the clink of glasses. No one asked about where I came from, only where I was going. The notebook still sits on my desk, closed now. I haven't added a new entry in months. I don't need to. It served its purpose not as a record of hurt, but as a reminder that I didn't imagine any of it, and that I didn't let it define me. Looking back, I understand something I didn't when I was younger. Recognition from others, even the ones you love, can't give you peace if you've spent your life chasing their approval. You have to build your own name, quietly sometimes, but firmly. If you've ever felt overlooked, if your birthday passed without a word, if your wins were met with silence while someone else's were paraded around, you're not alone, and you're not less. You just may need to write a different ending, one that belongs to you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched something in you, I'd love to hear where you're listening from and what part of this felt familiar. Take care of yourself, and if you haven't heard it in a while, you matter, just as you are.